Greetings folks, and welcome to another episode of 81632-bit. I'm your host as ever, Rob, and today, as you've seen by the title, we're looking at the Atari Lynx and why it failed. Now, yes, the Atari Lynx is another entry into Atari's long line of failures, because despite the legendary status of Atari as a video games company, it's actually had more failures than it's had successes, especially in terms of hardware. Now, back in the late 1980s, early 1990s, handheld consoles were becoming a thing. Nintendo were getting ready with the Game Boy, Sega ultimately launched the Game Gear, and Atari decided they wanted a piece of the action with their Lynx console. Now, the Atari Lynx console itself was originally developed by the people behind the video games company Epyx. Not Epic, Epyx. E-P-Y-X. And they called it the Handy. And it was developed for them by two former Commodore Amiga designers, R.J. Michael and Dave Needle. Now, this system was amazingly powerful, and the original design was completed in 1987. Now, it wasn't shown to the public until the Winter CES in January 1989. Now, Epic were having financial issues at the time, so looked for somebody to partner with. They spoke to Nintendo and Sega, who declined, probably because they had their own hardware in development at the time. But Atari decided that they would pick it up. Now, Epyx still ended up declaring bankruptcy. And they did this at the end of 1989, which essentially meant Atari became the complete owners of the whole Lynx stroke Handy project. In a hilarious turn of events, to actually develop software for the Handy required the use of Commodore Amigas, which meant Atari had to purchase hardware from its main rival in the home computer space. Now, the Lynx itself was quite a powerful machine for the time. As you've no doubt noticed from the videos that have been running in the background, it featured a full-colour LCD screen at a time when most handheld games were either your simple two-colour Game & Watch types, or were Nintendo's monochrome Game Boy. Now, the hardware inside the Lynx is pretty special, as is often the case with these things, especially from the designers of the Amiga. There's a lot of custom hardware in here, so let's just take a quick look. So, the CPU is, it's called Mica, and it's an 8-bit VLSI custom CMOS chip which runs at 16 MHz. Now, this chip itself features on an Atari Lynx Model 1. It's a VL65NCO2, which is based off the ubiquitous MOS 6502, which runs at 4 MHz. Now, there is a stereo version of this on the Lynx 2. The sound engine, it's got 4 channels of sound. It's got an 8-bit DAC. It has a custom designed video DMA driver with a 160 by 102 pixel resolution. Displays 4096 colours. And it's powered with up to 16 per scan line. It has a variable frame rate of up to 75 frames a second. There are 8 system timers, an interrupt controller, a UART, 512 bytes of bootstrap and game loading RAM. And then the second custom chip is the Suzy, which is a 16-bit VLSI custom CMOS that runs at 16 MHz. Now, this has an unlimited number of blitzer sprites with collision detection. It can do hardware sprite scaling, distortion and tilting. It can do hardware decoding of compressed sprite data. It can do hardware clipping and multi-directional scrolling. And it has a math engine which is 16-bit by 16-bit in hardware. which gives you 32-bit multiply, and you also have 32-bit divided by 16-bit for 16-bit divide, and it can work in parallel. The system has 64 kilobytes of DRAM, and the game cartridges came in sizes ranging from 128 to 512 kilobytes, or a bank switched option which could have 1 megabyte of data on it. In terms of output, she had a 3.5mm stereo jack, although on the Lynx Model 1 this was only a mono output. The custom Comlinks port for linking up multiple consoles. The screen itself was a 3.5-inch LCD, and it used 6 AA batteries in the Model 1, which gave 4 to 5 hours of gameplay, and the same number of batteries in the Model 2, which upped the battery life to 5 to 6 hours. Now, those specs are impressive, but when you compare them to its main competitor, really, the Game Boy, they were just too much. Whilst it was great to have what was in effect a 16-bit computer in your hands, it was too powerful. 4 to 5 hours on a set of batteries sounds great, but that's in ideal conditions with a brand spanking new set of batteries. You almost certainly would not get that kind of use, which meant that the Lynx suffered from the same fate as the PC Engine GT and the Sega Game Gear, in that realistically you needed a power adapter, which meant your portability was somewhat limited because you were basically sat at a chair near a power socket. Now, this did not help at all when it came to selling the system, especially when the Game Boy based its entire marketing around the fact that it was cheap, it was small, and you could take it anywhere, and you got hours upon hours out of 4 AA batteries, and you did. Now, another thing, apart from its ridiculously power-hungry specs, because that Core LCD really did suck the battery, was its price. Nintendo got the Game Boy out at around about the $100, £100 price point when it was released. The Lynx launched in the US in September 1989 at $179.99. That's roughly the equivalent to about $450 in modern terms. This was a killer. You could buy a home console for that. That wasn't too far removed from the price of a Sega Mega Drive / Genesis at the time. You know, you were getting something much more powerful. If you were going to be sat and you were needing wall sockets, you might as well have bought the Mega Drive at the time. And as seems to be the case with Atari hardware from the 2600 onwards, such as the 7800 and the Jaguar, the software support wasn't there. The Lynx itself was officially on the market from 1989 to 1995, so 6 years, although realistically it ceased to be any kind of sellable system from probably around about 92, 93, shortly after the introduction of the cost-reduced Lynx 2 model, which did manage to hit a $99 price point by the end. However, there were a grand total of 71 titles released for it across the course of its existence as official games. That's not a lot. 71 titles over a 6-year span. Realistically, you're looking at what? 11 games a year? And there were some good games in there, don't get me wrong. You had games that really showed the system off when it first came out, like Blue Lightning. You had Road Blasters. You had Gates of Zendcon, which is a pretty fun shooter. You had Todd's Adventures in Slime World, Chip's Challenge, Toki. But realistically, most of the games were not big titles. You had the occasional port. Desert Strike was ported across, for example, but the vast majority of the games were produced by small publishers such as Telegames, the remnants of Epics. There was a pretty good version of California games produced for the Lynx, and Atari themselves. So whilst Nintendo and even the Sega Game Gear were doing really rather well with licensed and recognisable titles, the Lynx suffered. Even when it did get something big to hang its hat on, such as Batman Returns, which was a packing game when it came out with the Lynx 2, it just didn't work. Sales figures are hard to come by. Most people accept that the Lynx probably sold somewhere in the region of 2 million hardware units worldwide, although this is disputed. I certainly knew people who had one. My next door neighbour Gary had one. It was a great thing to play on, but damn, it was big, it was bulky, and it was expensive. And it was another in that line of epic failures from Atari. At the same time they were trying to push this, they were trying to push the Jaguar, and realistically they spread themselves too thin. They couldn't get the third-party support for either machine, they couldn't get the market penetration, and some of the marketing was pretty good, to be fair. It just didn't work. The pricing was way off. I mean, £180 in 1989, that was killer. Like I said, you could buy a Mega Drive for that. That was the better buy. And yeah, Atari just didn't get anywhere with it, which was sadly the tale of Atari at the time. Atari had some great hardware with the Lynx. Even today, it remains a stunningly designed piece of hardware with an incredible amount of power. It's just, they couldn't sell it. It was Atari. It died. Atari themselves died, and what you have today as Atari really is a shambling zombie corporation which just trades off the name and the heritage. And yeah, the Atari Lynx, it failed. It failed hard, and it's kind of sad that it did, but when you look at it, you can see why, and it was almost inevitable. Anyway, thank you for watching today's video. As ever, I've been Rob. If you liked this video, do hit that like button. If you liked it a lot, do hit the subscribe button, and don't forget to ring the bell to be notified of new videos being uploaded. You'll see details of my BlueSky and my Mastodon and my Patreon and my Ko-fi pages on the end screen. And yeah, this is me saying thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next video.